All right, welcome to the April 3rd edition of This is Fine. This is all fine. I'm Scott Lewis, the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice San Diego. It is Friday. I hope everybody's stoked for the weekend. I don't know about you, but I'm still losing track of the days, but I hope to settle into a new rhythm. We had a bunch of friends get together and talk on Zoom last week, and it was fine. It was definitely better than I thought it would be. I hope you guys have a chance to settle into a rhythm too. I find it helps to have specific things you do on different days. Kind of demarcate it a little bit. I also wanted to give a shout out to those of you. So I don't know if you like me, you do the dishes at home. I feel like there's a lot of people doing the dishes these days, a lot more dishes. And so a shout out to all the soakers of dishes out there who soak the dishes. I'm not at all passively aggressively saying anything about my children. I wouldn't do that. I would talk to them directly. I wouldn't just broadcast live to the entire world about that. So shout out to the dish soakers. I also wanted to give, I've been trying to highlight some tweets and ideas that stand out. Shout out to Ryan Klumpner, whose tweet was a really good idea. I thought, he said, if I owned a gas station, I'd make it full service right now, where people come out and fill the gas for you so you don't have to touch stuff. Make it like the Oregon style. You would create a few jobs out of it, and customers might line up for that service right now, pay a few cents more to allow that to happen. Interesting idea. I was also monitoring on Twitter right this very moment. I had an exchange with Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. She represents the City Heights, South Bay area. She tweeted, there's been these crackdowns across the county and the state on people being at beaches and parks, and it's been hard on us, especially people. Every one of our lives, it feels like, interacts with parks or beaches. I thought when this all shut down, I thought, well, instead of going to the gym, I'll just surf all the time. And that ended quick. And there's been some confusion about it. Obviously, places like Oceanside didn't close their beaches. Coronado did not either. Coronado later this week, or Tuesday this week, decided that, well, okay, we'll close them on the weekends. Again, like anybody knows what a weekend is anymore. But we're going to close them on weekends. And then they said that they're going to close Dog Beach in Coronado on all the time. And I asked City Councilman Whitney Benzian of Coronado. I said, well, what's the deal with Dog Beach? Like, why not just close that on the weekends or whatever? And he said the logic was that dogs don't understand social distancing, dumb dogs. So that lack of understanding of the dogs would lead to people having to break that 6-foot gap between people. So they'd be all like smooching and stuff because their dogs were wrestling. So that was an interesting development. So I think Coronado, I find with these half measures, like when the zoo was trying to stay open and a few other places like that, those all end up like falling apart at some point soon. So we'll see how long that lasts. But again, I was having this exchange with Lorena Gonzalez on Twitter about parks and beaches. And she said, she had tweeted, in my district, you have apartments being shared by multiple families, generations, and kids who have no place to exercise, play, or get fresh air. We should have limited usage and monitor for social distancing. It is cruel to close all of our public spaces. I just think we could monitor spaces better. They are safer than grocery stores. She went on, she said, I also understand that many people have ruined that, especially at our beaches, but I'm finding that most policies being made, from either absolute closures to distance learning to doctors referred testing, aren't taking into account the realities of some of our communities. We're going to talk about the remote distance learning stuff that's happening right now. That's the main show part. This is my show, but that's going to be the main part of the show. But, there's a constant theme of what she's saying there is that it's fine to social distance. It's fine to avoid beaches and such if you have a big backyard, if you have a lot of internet connection. But there's a lot of people who don't have access to that. And she's plainly saying it's cruel for that. So it's something to follow up on with her. the county decided yesterday not to close all of its beaches and parks, but instead to close the parking lots and to close a lot of the facilities and make sure people didn't congregate. But they did not close down all the parks and beaches. Again, Coronado is kind of halfsy on it, and Oceanside still unwilling to, and there's a lot of pressure in Encinitas to open all the beaches there. So this is one of those things. I feel like there's a lot of people kind of going along with stuff right now, but there's some things building. You can feel the backlash to some of these things, especially as people get antsy. So particularly interesting, Lorena Gonzalez would do that. She's Assemblywoman again she represents the city in the state. She represents in particular the area of City Heights and South Bay, so all the way down to such. Something to watch there. Also, because her husband's a county supervisor making some of these decisions as well, and has been encouraging people in there. So the city of San Diego mayor, of course, was the first to close down all beaches and parks after they kind of got packed after that first weekend of quarantining, and so that's what she's kind of reacting to there. So we'll see if that lasts, because on the one hand, obviously, I'd love to get in the water again, and beaches were part of our daily life, and so to get out there again would be great. But on the other hand, like anything that makes this worse or longer is going to be awful. So I hope they come up with a good balance. All right, so main topic today, the takeaways from what's going to happen in San Diego Unified School District. So I mentioned Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez was saying that, hey, look, people can't have distance learning if they don't have good laptops, if they don't have good internet. And so, they're addressing that. The San Diego Unified School found out. Our Ashley McGlone and reporter Will Huntsberry came out with a story. It's on the voiceofsandiego.org website right now, and it details everything they could find out about how this distance learning thing is. They talked to the teachers union, talked to school board members, talked to the district, and pulled out some emails they obtained as well about how things are going to come together. So remember, the San Diego Unified School District, largest in the region, second largest in the entire state, is going to, on Monday, begin transitioning to distance learning and online learning. And so, they're going to do like 2 weeks of a trial on it, and then they're going to transition fully to implementing it as like a graded thing. And so everybody's been like, what? How is this going to work? What's going to happen? And so we found out basically 5 main things yesterday. One, when the grading does start, the grades can only go up. They cannot go down depending on the amount of work that students accomplish. You got that? Grades can only go up. They cannot go down. So Richard Barrera, a school board member, there's 5 school board members in San Diego Unified. Richard Barrera represents the southern part of the district. San Diego Unified does not cover the entire San Diego city limits. San Isidro is in another district, and the northern parts in Poway, Carmel Valley, those places are in different districts as well. But San Diego Unified, Richard Barrera has long been one of the leaders on the school board. He said the general idea is that no students are harmed, but students can improve. If a student had a B in geometry before the shutdown, that student would maintain a B regardless of how much work they complete once this official online learning begins. Fascinating discussion in their piece. Again, this is a piece on voiceofsandiego.org by Will Huntsberry and Ashley McGlone. There's a fascinating discussion in that piece. There's a researcher who studies online learning, and she points out that the graduate students, college students, higher level students, they do really good with online learning because they're into it. They're not captive. They want to learn. Usually, they're paying for it. They want to be there, and so it worked well for them. It's still unclear for K-12 students just how great it is if they're not into it. And so this is. I had a teacher bring up like, wow, that's going to really make it hard for me to motivate my high school students if there's no consequence. Barrera said officials anticipate fewer students will participate in online learning than generally show up to class each day. So be really interesting. The second takeaway, teachers will be able to choose from one of 3 levels of online curriculum based on how good they are at the internet, basically. um, so we got that from emails that we obtained that were being sent around from the district. So they're basically going to survey and try to understand each person is going to identify just how good they are at the internet and Google, stuff like that, stuff like this, and we'll see how it goes. Third takeaway, district officials will create new online learning objectives. So these are, this is basically the standards that they're going to come up with. That'll be interesting to watch, and they're going to have to be different and reduced compared to the Common Core standards that they've already put in place. So again, we're completely redefining what an education is if we're saying this is an education. All right, and finally, this one hits home for me. Special education services will not be delivered. I mean, of all it, there's so many gut punches coming these days. The parks and beaches, the stay away from your friends. The whole your life is changing. The labor, the economy, the layoffs. All these things are gut punches. But then, these little ones come in too. It's special education services will not be delivered. You read that sentence, and it's just like, oh. So, okay, well, we'll keep going. There was a quote from the labor leader, the teachers union leader at the school district. She said, her name is Keisha Borden. She said, "We're not going to be spending an entire school day on a computer, so what is it going to look like? What are the expectations of time spent?" And we asked Barrera on the school board, yeah, and he said he didn't know. I mean, that's the thing. Like, none of us know how any of this is going to work. Somebody asked me the other day, how's Voice of San Diego going to get through this? Well, we're going to work really hard. I don't know. We'll keep, I've never dealt with a complete economic shutdown before. I'm going to try to make sure we're relevant and interesting and do a good job. Well, hello, daughter. How are you? She's looking forward to online learning. Aren't you, Rui? So Barrera was not able to provide a detailed answer to the question, but he did say the amount of time spent on the computer will vary significantly between grade levels and the kinds of lessons teachers design. Some teachers might offer full classroom Zoom meetings, while others might assign projects. Quote, "Right now, we're hearing a lot from parents with varying levels of stress, frankly." This was from Keisha Borden, the teachers union. "Right now, we're hearing from parents with varying levels of stress. I think we have to be cognizant of the impact this is going to have on families as well. Some families are very lucky to have the means to support their children." So we're going from this big switch where teachers, they weren't necessarily off, but they weren't, in the classroom. And so they may have had a lot of time with their family and stuff like that, to switching it to now they have to educate everybody else and still take care of their families, which we're all, adjusting to. But it's certainly, obviously, the teachers union is going to be interested in that and probably have some requests, if not demands, on how it should be played out. So, again, fascinating story right now on Voice of San Diego about, how education is going to proceed. So I'd like to hear from you. What are your questions about how things are going? I'm not often able to answer everything here, but I can actually at least get it marked down so that we can look up it later. We're collecting all kinds of tips and questions from people about how life is going to be, what's happening. Let's see. A couple of just normal messages. Hi, Doug. Hi, Peter. Hi, Leonard. Thanks for joining. Appreciate everybody paying attention to these. We've been doing these alternately on Instagram and on Facebook and YouTube. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go through that, and on Twitter. Again, the 5 things from San Diego schools. Grades can only go up, not down. One thing, teachers will pick 1 through 3 different levels of what they can do as far as how good they are at the internet. No new learning objectives, and they will hope to expand the school year, this was the 5th, by several weeks. So that's really interesting. I think that there's a counter perspective, probably epitomized by Lorena Gonzalez and the teachers union, that says like, no, 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 we should try to save this year online. We should try to get through this and just extend the year next year. Maybe have kids go back earlier or stay longer later, and the state can pay us more money to make that possible. Here's a question: what about Imperial Beach? My son goes to Mendoza Elementary. I feel Sweet San Diego Unified more notifications. Good question. We'll check in on South Bay schools. I know Sweetwater was planning on getting back as well. Yeah, I'll check in on that. Jerry Gordon says, not sure. Educators loved hearing details on article, given we teachers haven't heard them directly. That can be a bad thing, or you can now prepared with answers and questions to take to them. I think our job is to make sure people are informed. If there's information out there that doesn't hurt somebody, maliciously and wrongly, I'm going to get it out there. That's my job. Our job with San Diego is to do investigative reporting on the one hand, find things out people don't want us to find out, and then second is to explain things, so make sense of the things they are saying. And so we'll see. I understand teachers. If you're a teacher out there trying to make this work, I'd love to hear from you. It does sound like there's this soft launch kind of thing happening. So you have April 6th through April 27th to see how it works. What I think is going to be kind of freaky is what happens if you have a high school class or middle school class, something like that, and they say, and there's like 10 people there for a 30-person class or something. What's going to happen there? Do you keep going with those 10? Do you, try to punish or enforce the other 20 that aren't showing up? Do you, I don't know, what happens? Like what happens if one of the kids shows up and puts Zoom bombs it, as it's called, the meeting where they put up a bad picture or something like that? There's gonna be a lot of really interesting questions here. On the one hand, it's probably gonna sting for a lot of people. On the other hand, we're gonna learn a lot. What if we could save all the effort to get to physical buildings maybe once a week and hold things online? There's a lot of really interesting silver linings here. I wanted to talk about some of those before we close out. And I don't mean silver linings like the air is clean, which is pretty cool. And I don't mean silver linings like I got to finish, rewatch the entire series of The Wire. I mean silver linings like we're actually, changing things, and we might change them for the better. So Andy Keats, our reporter, talked yesterday about how in the city of San Diego, you'll now be able to get permits for things entirely online. You've seen people walk downtown with these architectural schematics, rolled up in their hands, and they walk into the old city building and they got to wait and stuff. Well, now they're saying that they've been working and can now do all that online to respect social distancing and stuff like that. So fascinating thing. So that's the kind of silver lining I'm talking about. We might actually, through this experience, accelerate ways to interact and be more efficient. Maybe there's a bunch of people finding out that actually I can have a smaller office building and let people work remotely. They work more flexibly. They have more control over their days. That might be a more successful way to operate. It might be cheaper. A lot of governments might find that out, like we're seeing with the online development services. If you're getting a permit, why does the guy have to be downtown to process that? That doesn't make any sense, or in Kearny Mesa or whatever. So that's really interesting. I also think there's, I saw a for rent sign up this week in my neighborhood. Saw another one right as I passed it. That's kind of interesting. It feels like we've now switched from this crisis of you couldn't rent anything. It was so expensive. It was brutal to live here. We were driving out. Our companies were nervous about getting people to live here affordably. That dynamic has just completely changed. Not only are people going to have trouble making rent and changing things, but also the vacation rentals. There's probably no market right now for renting out a vacation rental, and might not come back for any time soon. So how many of those will flood onto the market? We'll have an actual real-time test about whether, if you shut it down, that really would change our dynamic with rental housing and make it more affordable to live and work here instead of visit. So I think that we're also seeing public agencies that weren't all that good at streaming their government meetings and such. They might get better at that. So if you have any of those type of silver linings, I'd love to hear them. These are, things that change about our our lives that, we might learn something from this. So I'd love to hear from you, any questions you have about voice. And so I'll leave on that note. Voice of San Diego. So just a quick history. So March 10th or March 9th, is Monday, March 9th. You remember back in the old days, Monday, March 9th? We were meeting because we were trying to decide whether we could keep having our live podcast event scheduled for that Wednesday, March 11th at UC San Diego. And it was a really interesting decision because there was the night before, the chancellor of the university, Pradeep Khosla, had announced that they were going to cut off access to the university. They wanted to make it not, locked down, but they were going to make it like, hey, don't come on the university campus unless you like are running a lab here or something. Like, let's do that. And so we saw that, and well, we were having an event there, and it's like, wow. So we called our people that we were having the event with, our partners at the school, at the global school, and we asked, what's the deal with global policy, GPS? We asked, what's the deal? And they're like, well, you can still have it, but... And so we had this adorable conversation looking back of like, what should we do? Should we have this or not? And so we ended up deciding to not have it. We decided to not have it. So that was that Wednesday. We ended up having the podcast at our office instead. And at the studio, we brought in the people who were going to be on as guests. And it was during that hour that two things happened that really changed our life. One was that Tom Hanks announced that he'd gotten the disease, which I think really brought home, like, this was really getting out there. And then second, the NBA canceled its season. All of that happened within that hour that we were doing that podcast. And so the world completely changed. And so the next day we met and we decided, like, hey, we're either going to be victims of what happens here, or we're going to be relevant. People support Voice of San Diego. We're a nonprofit. We have about 3,000 donors, a bunch of corporate sponsors, stuff like that. If we're relevant, people will continue to support us. If not, we're going to be victims to this incredible economic collapse. And so we all rallied, started doing a lot of investigative work and a lot of explanatory work to help people understand what was going on. Everybody's done a great job. It's so productive these days. I'm really pleased. We're in the middle, though, of our campaign. So we had this spring fundraising campaign already set. So we had to kind of change that when everything changed. And so now we're making that case. Like, we're following this crisis on three levels. One is the biology and healthcare issue. Are our frontline healthcare providers protected the way they should be? Do they have everything they need? Are we overwhelmed? Where are we at with that? Keeping major tabs on that. The second area is how governments are responding, not just to the crisis itself, but these decisions they're making on the side, and how they're going to deal with, a complete cratering of their revenues. Again, we went about a month ago. We went to we were having this election on whether to expand the convention center, whether to raise hotel room taxes, whether to raise hotel room taxes to expand the convention center, and that use some of that money also to fund homeless services. And now the convention center's a homeless shelter. That tax failed, and hotel taxes have zeroed out. And so combine that with sales tax. There's also, SDG&E pays San Diego, the city of San Diego, a fee, for all the energy that's used. And if you no longer pay, if the Hilton downtown is no longer running its HVAC at the same level, there's going to be significant changes in electricity usage in San Diego. Well, so there's little revenue streams like that. There's Mission Bay hotels, SeaWorld, all these places that aren't going to be able to pay the same level of rent and are already asking for benefits, if not, but some of them are paying based on their revenue. And so, following how governments are going to respond to this, they're all going to have to cut services, or they're going to have to furlough workers. The mayor was asked today if he's furloughed any workers, and he didn't answer the question. He instead said that all workers are reclassified now as disaster workers, so they might be pushed to do different things that maybe than they're normally doing. And so that's a fascinating thing, but he hasn't announced whether he plans or is planning any furloughs or layoffs. And hey, how many of those are you going to have? Okay. Um, Working from home. How about you? Um, he hasn't announced any plans for furloughs or layoffs, but how are they going to get through losing $200 million if if they don't do some of these cuts or changes or whatever? So that's just something to watch for. And then the third area that we're really following is this question of the economy. Horrifying unemployment claim levels, businesses just barely holding on. I went and got takeout from my favorite Mexican restaurant the other day, and the guy it's not Mexican, sorry. It was, and he said, not, we're not going to make it, I don't think. And that was just like a brutal thing to hear. I was just really sad to hear that, and I said, "Well, isn't the landlord giving you a break?" And he says, "No, not at all." And like, I gotta rethink that. That guy's been there like 23 years, and it's a great place. I'll just tell you, it's Ortega's Cocina in Ocean Beach, wonderful place. And um, you know, he says, "I don't know what we're gonna do. I just can't last this much longer. He needs to give us a break." Well, like, you need to. Uh, why wouldn't you give a break? It's not like another business is going to move in and do better right now. Everybody's stopped. Like, what are you going to put there that makes money? Like an Amazon distributor? Like, it's crazy. So I hope that there's some longer term thinking. I've obviously been following this discussion about the moratoriums that the city and other places are imposing on foreclosures. So remember, if you get not foreclosures, evictions, if you get evicted from your house, it often has to be enforced by a local government, by cops. And so what they're saying is, we're not going to let the cops do that for the next few months. But along with that is a really interesting caveat. You still have to pay the back rent. And so I was worried the other day about what happens in 3 months when, let's say, you lost your job now, you can't get one back till June, so you missed 3 months rent. You got to come up with $1,000 by October, and then you got to come up with October's rent too. Like, are you really going to come up with $8,000 to $10,000 if you're completely destitute right now? And a lot of people pointed out, well, look, that's going to give renters this leverage. Remember, we talked about these new vacancies creating leverage. Well, that's, renters are going to have more leverage now. They're going to be able to negotiate, and landlords are going to be interested in modifying it. I hope that's true. Otherwise, we've set in motion a ticking time bomb, rent bomb, and in October or September, that rent bomb is going to go off on a lot of people, and that's just that's kind of a nightmare. So I hope we're prepared for that. And so those are the kind of government or economic decisions that we're really tracking. Businesses on the edge, the economy and the numbers coming into local governments and the revenues. So those three areas: healthcare, the front lines, how government's reacting to it, and then how the economy is affected. Those are the three areas we're focused on. And so it's weird how the crisis has juiced and framed every other issue we covered, like education. Education is all about this, even though it's not about the virus specifically. It's about this. It's about coronavirus and the pandemic and the economic disruption that it's caused. We basically decided as a global community that the economy is what spreads this disease. Thus, we have to shut down the economy to cure the disease. And so you hear words like stimulus. The stimulus, it's not stimulating anything. The economy is deliberately shut down. It's like trying to turn on a car where the key is off. the key is off. You can't jump start a car when it's off. And so so when we turn that back on, and whether it's safe to turn that back on, and whether the car would have been hurt, the machine of global economy would have been hurt worse if we let this virus ravage it. And so so there's no quick fix. There's no quick switch here. And so as we go through that, the staff has decided that's what we're going to be focused on is, the economy, how governments deal with this change, and the healthcare front. And so we have 16 employees now, all working their butts off to either provide this investigative reporting, this explanatory reporting, or to find out things that people don't want us to find out. And then there's people supporting them, helping us organize things like this, do videos, do graphs, do graphics, do photography, do multimedia efforts, and all kinds of things. And then we have a group of people who make sure that they have enough money. And that group of people is very compelling these days. We want that group of people to survive and thrive and do well and succeed. And so please consider donating. We put the note up in there in the comments so you can find that easily. It's vosd.org/give. And thanks to everybody who does do that. We have, again, more than 3,000 donors. We hope to emerge from this stronger with a better connection to all of you, but that means we got to provide a service, and I can't thank you enough for being there for us. A couple of tips for the weekend. I recommend keeping a journal. I remember I watched a video on KPBS, a documentary about the Dust Bowl, and they were talking about like western Kansas and eastern Colorado area, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the time my grandma was there. That was where my grandma was. And so, rather than call and have this like normal conversation with her I usually had, I called her and I asked her about that, and I listened for just riveted for like 40 minutes about what that was like, what life was like, what people had to do and deal with. And so my advice to you is like, this is that right now. Like, this is that for us. Like, we're gonna have a lot of stories to tell about this, and hopefully people will learn from this in the future. And so write it down. Write down what school was like. Write down what, take a minute to write down what you felt, what you went through, so that you can look back at when we're on the other side of this and look back at what that was like, because it's not hopefully ever going to be this weird again. Well, I have no idea what it's going to be. It seems like there's a book that came out that said that every 80 years, civilization loses itself. Like, it's just every 80 years, kind of like a clock, it all blow up, like big World War II, for example, 80 years ago, those kinds of things. So, maybe we get to the other side of this, and when I'm 120 or whatever, I can tell people about it the next time a pandemic or whatever comes out. So I recommend a journal. I'm back to it. Not, you have to get nuts about it. Write down a couple of things. Try to store it somewhere. Maybe find a way electronically to do that. If you're having trouble staying in shape or getting into a rhythm, I recommend the Orange Theory app and the Orange Theory YouTube videos. About 30 minutes every day, and they've been kicking my butt. So I do that, and I try to do some pull-ups and things every other day. Recommend that. That's an interesting question. Maybe I'll deal with that. And okay, so a couple of things like that. Journal, Orange Theory workouts. They're free on YouTube, I think. Just a good little workout. You use like suitcases or something if you need a weight resistance. It's pretty cool. Watch, we're all going to come out ripped, right? You don't have to be productive during this time. I do. I have to do a lot of work, but you don't have to like learn to play the guitar or something. Give yourself a break. All right. Interesting point. Jeff Olson brings up the media industry. Says, curious to hear your view on the LA Times paywall. Well, I've run into the LA Times paywall as well. I subscribe to the Union Tribune. Here, I wish that you could get the LA Times with that subscription. I don't really feel like once you subscribe to like 4 or 5 different places, you're paying a $1,500 a year or whatever, a month, sometimes to get get all these different things. And so wherever you could cross over would be nice. I say that as somebody I hope you pay a little bit every month to help get all this done. So look, what's happening in the news industry is really simple. The news industry used to be funded by advertising. Well, it still is. It was an incredibly powerful advertising system. If you wanted to reach a whole community, you had to do that through the newspaper. The newspaper was the central information source for any metropolitan area. And so it could charge extraordinary rates for advertising for that. So all these giant department stores, places used to pay so much money. That's why there's these, mansions or buildings named after newspaper publishers, the Hearst Castle, all these places. The newspaper made tremendous amounts of money because of how much it could, charge in ads. Well, ads, were great, except for the internet came along, and you could do advertising better in different ways. You could do Facebook or all these places we're on right now, or Google, all these places that do a better job tracking advertising and charging based on their performance of that advertising. And so newspapers have lost so much money to that. And so even if their audiences are exploding, there's more attention on news than ever by orders of magnitude. So it's not that their product isn't interesting, but their advertising model was struggling, and they've lost it to this. And so every news organization in the country, almost every news organization, has started to realize it has to go to its readers for support. And instead of this advertising system, so it has to create membership models or subscription paywalls or whatever. And readers who care about that information have to get to it. And so you can be mad at the LA Times paywall, but if they don't put that up, who's going to pay? How are they going to pay all of the journalists? They saved the company, they unionized the company, they hired a bunch of people, invested a ton of money. He can't keep losing money on it like that. He's got to make it back, and the only way to make that back is to get people to pay for news. So we haven't adopted a paywall because we're a nonprofit, and that presents a number of different questions. Doesn't mean I'm not interested in premium products or having somebody pay for different access, but haven't got there yet. But that is the primary problem with the traditional news organization, is that they're trying to make that switch. And so it's just been brutal to watch. Buffalo News furloughed a bunch of employees. Tampa Bay Times is struggling. The UT just bought out 4 veteran reporters and photographers. There's all of these changes and cutbacks and struggling just locally. City Beat shut down. San Diego Magazine shut down, at least temporarily, laid off all its employees. San Diego Home and Garden shut down. We're watching just horrifying economic play being performed in front of us of just the shocking dimensions. And so it's a great time to run a news organization. But the point is this is the ultimate test of this nonprofit model. Like, okay, we have 3,000 donors. Are they all going to be able to donate again? Or are we going to replace the ones who can't? Are major donors going to want to match their contributions like we did for this campaign? All these questions are really interesting. We get most of our revenue for Voice of San Diego in the final quarter of the year, so between October and December. And so for now, things are tracking better than they were last year. Things are great, but how long does that, I've never been through a challenge like this. I actually consider it the challenge of my lifetime. So I think it's I totally understand these news companies that have to put up these paywall subscriptions. You may say, I need this information because of what's happening, and they're saying somebody has to pay for it. So maybe the government comes up with something, or or an advertiser wants to do it a little bit. But again, advertising is being just crushed right now. And so subscriptions are where it counts. I did see a lot of positive information on this, though, this week. The Atlantic magazine The Atlantic announced that in the last couple of weeks, it's gotten 36,000 more subscriptions, just an extraordinary number to sign up online for something like that. And the Atlantic's actually been providing some incredibly relevant and interesting coverage. And I think those are related concepts, right? That's, again, what we try to do too, is like be incredibly resourceful and relevant to people, and maybe we'll make some money. So, as in like pay people. All right. So if you are compelled to support, go to voicesandiego.org/give. You can also check out the link that they posted there. Those are the fronts we've been talking about. I saw a couple comments. I swapped push-ups or push-up. Oh, did I say? Okay, good one. Doug Clark, confusing on masks, different directives, save for healthcare workers over 65. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't quite understand it either. I think what they're saying is that if you work in an essential area, you have to wear a mask, and that it's recommended in other places in the public. Interesting, the mayor of L.A., Garcetti, he said you got to wear them. So I don't know if that starts getting enforced or not, but that's a fascinating development. Okay, well, check out thevoiceofsandiego.org. We did that story on how the education system is going to react on Monday, at least San Diego Unified, to all of these new online learning directives. Fascinating moment for San Diego Unified. Great timely story by Will Huntsberry and Ashley McGlone. Check that out, voicesandiego.org. Sign up for our morning report. Comes out every day, 5 a.m. Great way to keep up on all this stuff. And politics report, I got to write that. That's due tomorrow. That comes out every Saturday. A bunch of other newsletters you can find at voiceofsandiego.org. Thank you all for coming, and let me know what you think of these as well. And we will try doing them more. All right. Cheers.